Everyone. Welcome to today's best practice session, Scaling Health Across Portfolios and Unlocking the Power of Fitwel Portfolio-Wide Solutions. We're glad you all could join us today. We're going to give everybody a minute just to join and settle in. But while we're waiting, per usual, if you join a past session, we'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. And for this session, we wanted to make things a little fun. And have a little fun question again, just like last month. So if you want to share any good books or films that you've read or watched recently in the chat. So I'll share first. I'm joining from Denver, Colorado, and I'm excited to go see Project Hail Mary since it was one of my favorite reads this year. And if anybody's just joining, we're sharing where we're tuning in from and any films or books we're reading right now. Oh, Michael, our guest from last month, going to see Project Hail Mary tonight. I'm jealous. I have to wait for some friends to finish reading it. We'll give everybody just a minute or two and probably start like 2 after. Such a classic, a little throwback. Rose Code. I'll have to add some of these to my list. Okay, we'll continue to send your books and movies in the chat and where you're tuning in from. We love to take a look at these and reflect back on who we had join. It looks like we've had about 10 more people join, so I just wanted to note again, we're just sharing where we're tuning in from and books or movies that we recently watched or read or are currently reading that you would like to share. Okay, well, I will jump in. Thanks, everybody. Continue to share in the chat, as I mentioned. And for those that I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet, my name is Whitney Nielsen, and I'm the Director of Client Engagement here at Fitwel. I've been with the team for about 5 years and originally joined as a relationship manager supporting our champion users. And today I am joined by 2 amazing members of the Fitwel team who helped bring Fitwel portfolio-wide strategies to life that we are discussing today. So first we have Denalyn, our digital product manager, who played a key role in developing the portfolio-wide strategies functionality on the platform. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Denalyn Idzik, based in the Chicagoland area. And I originally joined the Center for Active Design over 6 years ago. Previously, I was the director of certification, where I actually worked closely with our standard team to offer portfolio-wide strategies as an offline process. And then later on, I transitioned to our tech team as a product manager, where I led the transition of PWS into a fully integrated experience onto our platform. It's actually been incredibly rewarding to see it come full circle, so I'm excited for today's call. And then just to answer your first question, I am steering in a slightly different direction just because I love supporting live theater and local playhouses. So recently I did watch a play called Out of Order, which was this hilarious farce, and definitely recommend it if it's in your local area.
I love that and very typical for you. So thank you for sharing. And we're also joined today by Rachel Seco, our Director of Standard Development, who many of you may know from our previous webinar, like last month, and who works on the development and evolution of the Fitwel standard itself. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Whitney. As Whitney mentioned, I'm Rachel Seco. I'm the Director of Standard Development. I've been with Fitwel for almost 7 years now. But for those who don't know, my role involves overseeing the development and updates to our scorecards and ensuring everything we produce is evidence-based, practical, and aligned with market needs. Like Whitney, I also live in Denver, Colorado. And to answer your prompt, I read this book a while back, but cannot recommend Remarkably Bright Creatures enough. I loved it. It's very heartwarming and wonderful. And Netflix is releasing a movie based on this in May, I think. So that's exciting.
I am very excited about that as well and read it because of you.
Yeah.
So before we dive in, thank you both for joining. We're very excited to have multiple perspectives from the Fitwel team on the call today. And a few quick housekeeping notes per usual. So today's session is scheduled for about an hour. but we try to keep these sessions as close to 45 minutes as we can. Some sessions are longer than others, just depending on the content that we're reviewing. And if we end early, we would love to give you all some precious time back in your day. So feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar in the chat or using the Q&A function. We'll either answer them live as they come up. We might answer your question later in the session as well, or we'll save them for the Q&A at the end. We'll also be sharing links in the chat throughout the session, so keep an eye out there for any resources and some discount codes at the end. Today's session is being recorded, and the recording will always be shared afterwards in a follow-up email, and they are also all hosted on our Help Center. So you can find the recordings for all of our past best practice sessions there, and we'll share that link in the chat now. Today, we're really excited to focus on how organizations can implement Fitwel at scale. So specifically, we will be talking about why portfolio-wide strategies were created, how they can help streamline certification across portfolios, what the user experience looks like on the platform itself, and how you can start using portfolio-wide strategies today. So our goal today is to really help you understand how to make Fitwel implementation more efficient across multiple assets. So to start, we will talk about why portfolio-wide strategies, or PWS, as I'll be referring to it since it is a mouthful, were created in the first place. So over the years, we've seen more and more organizations pursuing Fitwel certifications across entire portfolios. And what we've heard consistently from users was that many of you were implementing the same strategies across multiple buildings, things like policies, protocols, or operational standards. So that meant in practice that teams were often uploading the same documentation repeatedly across those multiple assets, receiving similar review comments across those same assets, and then making the same revisions over and over again, which can lead to some mistakes and some duplicative efforts. So this becomes very time consuming, as some of you may know, for both the project teams themselves as well as our certification team. So we started asking ourselves, how can we make this process more efficient for users implementing Fitwel at scale in this way? So Rachel, can you share a little bit about how we began the process to address that problem that we were seeing?
Yeah, of course. So the first step for us on the standard development team was to evaluate the strategies that could realistically be applied at the portfolio level, rather than the asset level. And so some strategies naturally lend themselves to that kind of implementation, particularly policies, operational procedures, things like that organizations already apply across their portfolios rather consistently. So some of you may be familiar with the concept of portfolio-wide solutions from your experiences with VRM and VRA, or FSP. We really drew on lessons learned from both VRM and FSP when developing the portfolio-wide strategies approach. From there, we tested an offline version of PWS with some of our champion users to see how the process could work in practice. And that testing phase really gave us invaluable insight into how users were implementing strategies at scale and what kind of workflow would make the most sense. So those learnings ultimately shaped and helped inform the portfolio-wide strategies functionality that you now see on the platform.
Amazing. And thanks for sharing that insight. It's really a great example, as many of you probably saw in our last webinar, how we engage with our users to really ensure the solutions that we're looking to put in place on the platform really respond to the needs of the users that will be implementing them. So let's start with the basics and kind of go back a little bit. What exactly are portfolio-wide strategies? So these portfolio-wide strategies, or PWS, allow organizations to submit documentation for select strategies one time at the portfolio level, rather than submitting that same documentation across multiple individual projects. So once those strategies are reviewed and approved, they can then be automatically applied to eligible projects within that same portfolio. So really functioning at that portfolio level and capturing those projects. So this can significantly reduce the amount of duplicate documentation and review cycles when you're working across those multiple assets. Rachel, one question we often get in response to PWS application is which strategies are actually eligible for PWS and how do those differ depending on the scorecards?
Great question. Yes, first to answer your second question, the strategies that can be submitted as portfolio-wide do vary depending on the certification pathway and the scorecard. And we've created a PWS matrix that outlines exactly which strategies are eligible for each scorecard. Um, so we'll show that matrix on the screen now. Thank you. And in the chat, so you can get a sense of how it works, and we'll share a link so you can download it as well. But to orient everyone on how to use this resource and how it's set up, so it provides an overview on that first page of PWS, how they can be applied. And then, as you saw on the second page at the start of the matrix, so this provides an overview of the strategies that have portfolio-wide solutions and the scorecards they apply to. So in the matrix, you'll find a list of V3 strategies on the left side and the option pathway, the answer option. And then at the top, you'll see the scorecards across there. And X indicates that the strategy is eligible as PWS for that scorecard. If you see NA, it means the strategy doesn't apply to the scorecard. And unmarked cells indicate that the strategy applies, but it's just not eligible for PWS for whatever reason. In general, the strategies included here are ones that tend to be implemented consistently across assets. So again, things like policies, O&M procedures, things that organizations already apply portfolio-wide.
Amazing. I'm so excited we have this list and this matrix. So thanks for walking us through how we organized this resource for everyone. And if you ever need a quick refresher on what PWS is and what the strategies can be submitted for each scorecard, this is a great resource, as Rachel mentioned. So it can orient you to, what we just covered. What is PWS? What is the value? And then how to use it depending on the types of assets you have within your portfolio and how really, really optimize and make the process the most efficient. So I will stop sharing there. So to dive a little deeper into the application, a question we have heard from our early users, those adopters that we had working offline. Let's say I have one or two strategies in my portfolio that qualify for portfolio-wide submission. Is it worth submitting these strategies for PWS, or should I just submit those strategies individually across each project?
Another great question. Yes, you absolutely can still use PWS, and it is worth doing so, even if it's just for one or two strategies. So you don't need to submit a response and documentation for every eligible PWS. You can choose, one, two, three, whatever works for your portfolio. You can submit one strategy, a few, or all of them available for your portfolio's applicable scorecards or scorecard. And even applying PWS to just a couple strategies is still going to help reduce documentation and streamline that review process across those multiple projects.
No, that's a great point. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if you're thinking you might only have one or two strategies applicable here. So another thing to keep in mind is that if you have a mixed asset portfolio, you will need to pursue PWS separately for each scorecard that is applicable to your portfolio, as the platform efficiency is tied to the scorecard and certification pathway, which is built and designed. So if you're submitting the same documentation for approval across your mixed asset portfolio, this ensures that once they're all approved for each scorecard type, it can be applied across all relevant assets, no matter which ones you're registering. Okay, thanks for sharing, Rachel. And then now that we've talked about the why and the what, I want to shift gears and take a look at how this works on the platform itself. So Denelyn, before we jump into our live walkthrough on the platform today to really show everybody what this looks like, we're lucky to have your unique perspective and expertise on the call. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about the process behind building portfolio-wide strategies into the platform. What were some of the things your team focused on when designing this experience?
Yeah, happy to share. So as I mentioned earlier, PWS had already been offered offline. Like Rachel had mentioned, we gained a lot of valuable insights, not just from that offline process with PWS, but also VRM, VRA, and FSP. So I really wanted to make sure that PWS reflected how users were already trying to work at scale, while eliminating some of the pain points that they went through this process. I also made it a point to collaborate very closely with both internal teams and external partners, including several champion users who had previously participated in this offline process. And so their feedback helped us to understand three key aspects. So the first was what parts were working well, such as a one-time review and approval of those shared policies and protocols used across multiple assets, or the fact that project teams knew that their documents were already pre-approved prior to submission. Second, we were able to also identify where users were experiencing friction. For the offline process, it was just still this need to manually upload the pre-approved documents to relative strategies and assets, which could be a lot, and so that was a really big pain point. And then lastly was basically how we could just create the workflow that would feel intuitive on the platform. I think that the biggest pain point was just the fact that it did not exist on the platform. So as soon as we were able to integrate that, it just really helped boost efficiencies for our users. But anyway, so for this sort of last part about the workflows, we did have calls with a variety of partners for us to be able to share a first look of the workflows and design screens to gather more feedback. And also during these user sessions, they helped us prioritize the PW enhancements based on what mattered most to them. And then from there, our goal really was just to create something that would allow users to take advantage of the policies, protocols, and strategies that they were already implementing across their portfolios, being able to save time on documentation and review, and accelerating their project towards certification.
Amazing. This has been really exciting to see users already starting to use PWS. We have some of them on the call that have already initiated some scorecards, and we're celebrating some as part of Best in Building Health coming out tomorrow. So stay tuned for that as well. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll take a look at what this actually looks like on the platform. 1 second. Okay. So for our demo today, we'll be walking through portfolio-wide strategies applied within a mixed asset portfolio. So you'll see on screen that there are projects from various scorecards and in various stages throughout the certification process. As a quick note right now, because PWS is still in its pilot phase, it does need to be initiated by a Fitwel admin. So if you're interested in getting started, you can reach out to info@fitwel.org or your relationship manager, and our team can help set it up. So when initiating PWS, the first step is selecting the scorecard and certification pathway. And I'll hop into a scorecard in a minute, just so everybody knows I'm not showing anything new on screen right now. And as we mentioned earlier, the reason you have to choose a scorecard and a certification pathway is because the efficiencies at the asset level are mapped in that way. So it is scorecard and certification pathway specific. So when you're reaching out to info at or your relationship manager, we do need to know which scorecard you'll be using and which certification pathway. And as soon as we've set it up and we have all the PWS scorecards you've requested, you will see portfolio-wide strategies added as a tab on your portfolio view. So we are so dashboard is your account view, portfolio overview. We are in our 2026 demo portfolio. And then once a PWS scorecard has been added, you will see this tab. You won't see it if you don't have any PWS scorecards. So I will click into that. If you have multiple PWS scorecards for a portfolio, they'll all appear down here as separate line items. As you see, we have 2 in this portfolio. And as another note, only company leads and portfolio managers are able to view this portfolio-wide strategies tab. So ensure that anyone working on these scorecards has the correct access by selecting View Portfolio Information and then selecting Edit, and you can add any portfolio managers that will need to work on these scorecards. And then ensure that you also press the Save button. Very important little call out there. So I will go back to our portfolio-wide strategies view. So you can change any of your project team members there. And then once you ensure everybody has the right access, you can then select the resume button. For our demo today, I'll use this FSP MFR V3 built scorecard. So if you're familiar with the Fitwel platform, this looks like a typical project scorecard. The main difference is that it contains only a subset of V3 strategies, those that are eligible for a portfolio-wide submission, and it does not result in a certification. Instead, you receive an approval since this is an efficiency resource. I'll pause on the overview page here, and Denalyn, can you walk us through what users will see on this page?
Yeah, absolutely. So here on this page, you'll see a few important elements that we've added. So first is this PWS status box, and it indicates how far along your PWS is. So whether it's in progress like this one, whether it's submitted and in review or completed. Since this is an in-progress PWS, the status is displaying that 5 out of 8 of the available strategies have been completed. And then next to it, you'll also see an impact section, which helps explain how portfolio-wide strategies will affect your projects across the portfolio. So whether they're STAR or in this case, an FSP scale certification. So for example, we're showing on this screen that there are 4 pursued strategies, indicating that a potential of 4 strategies would carry over to an FSP MFR v3.0 built certification once these PWS strategies are approved. And then lastly, there's also an important note at the bottom explaining the eligibility details about how the approved strategies at the portfolio level are automatically applied as pre-approved portfolio-wide strategy efficiencies at the project level. So this means that these efficiencies will apply to new project registrations, recertifications, and even projects that are already in progress, as long as they're using the same scorecard and certification pathway by PWS. This last part is exciting because it's actually the first time efficiencies can be applied to in-progress scorecards, allowing those projects that were previously registered to benefit from PWS.
It is very exciting that the in-progress projects can now benefit from this efficiency. That's been a huge enhancement. So we'll show everyone what those pre-approvals that you mentioned look like at the asset level per strategy in a minute when we go to the asset itself and we're going to review a STAR certification. But right now we'll stay on this PWS scorecard and review what the strategies will look like on your digital scorecard here for PWS specifically. So how to respond to strategies will again feel very familiar if you've completed a Fitwel Star or FSP certification. So you simply select on the left side this portfolio-wide strategies tab, where you normally would find the sections on a STAR certification or the targeted outcomes on an FSP certification. So this will open all strategies eligible for PWS submission in a single running list. Here you can see there are 8 strategies available, and they are broken out and categorized by the targeted outcomes available within this scorecard. So from there, you respond to strategies just like you would in a normal project scorecard, uploading documentation and selecting responses. You'll first select yes or no, and then the options will open up. This one already has some responses, so they won't open up. But if you select option, this tab pops up on the right here, and you can review all requirements and applicable compliance documentation. And then it's a very nice project management tool if anybody hasn't used this on our new V3 enhancements, but you actually will check when you've actually uploaded the documentation. So it's a great practice to get into as well. And then once you do that, you can also actually, instead of just clicking the option, just to kind of orient some people to the platform, if you're not familiar, you can also just select view requirements and compliance documentation if you're not ready to select an option just yet. And as a note, if we have this banner at the top here, and the banner notes that the strategy requirements listed follow the project level criteria. So to respond for PWS application, you may check off and complete the requirements as they apply to your portfolio, and they'll be reviewed in that manner as well. So submitting any policies and templates at the portfolio level and not asset specific. And if there are strategies that you do not want to submit for portfolio-wide application, you can simply select no as your response, as all strategies will need a response in order to submit. So if there's anything, and there's also just to note here real quick, and we'll cover this specifically on the scorecard in a minute, but there will be the opportunity at the asset level to opt out of any strategies that were approved at the PWS efficiency and on the scorecard. So if it doesn't apply to a specific asset, but you still want to pursue it at the portfolio level because it applies to the rest of them, you can still submit for those and opt out for specific assets that it doesn't apply to. And then once you're ready and all strategies have been responded to, this Submit PWS button at the top will change from this gray color to blue, and you'll be able to select it, and the submission will go to our certification team for review. And as a note, the review timeline for PWS is 6 weeks. So it's a 2-week initial review with our reviewers on the certification team, a 2-week period for client response, which is where you can make revisions, revise your documentation, and re-upload it. for final review. So client response is really that great time to respond to those initial review comments. And then once the process is complete, the PWS scorecard status will be marked completed. And I'll back out to our PWS tab. So you can see here we have this multi-tenant base building project as completed. So I'll jump in here and just show you what this looks like on the project overview page that Denelin oriented us to. So on a completed project, you'll see that on here, it does tell us now that 15 out of 15 strategies were completed. So you'll see there's a different number of strategies available for this scorecard type and application. And then you can see that 12 out of those 15 were actually achieved. So the impact on STAR certification is 12 strategies and 21 points. So any brand new MTBB built STAR certification would receive 21 points upon registration, which is really exciting. So as we mentioned earlier, and as I just alluded to, we really want to show you what that looks like on a STAR certification itself. So for today's demo, we'll continue with this multi-tenant base building STAR certification, and we'll return to the portfolio tab. And this first project you can see aligns with that scorecard we were just on and is the same as our PWS. So we'll jump here. And this project was just registered. So we're jumping in to the resume phase right now, but for anybody familiar with the registration process, this project just went through the product selection tool and confirmed the recommended scorecard, which was multi-tenant base building V3 built. So Denelin, I'll hand it over to you to review what a user would see when they select resume on this newly registered project that qualifies for PWS.
Sure. So when you are navigating to this scorecard overview page, any project team member will be able to see all the efficiencies applied under the scorecard status box, which you're highlighting right now on screen. And so this list does include pre-approved portfolio-wide strategies, which we can see here, those 12 have been applied. And in particular for this scorecard, they've also received 4 pre-approved auto-scored efficiencies. We do also list the pre-approved and partially approved for recertification, but because this project is a first-time certification, those efficiencies would not apply. However, this is one of the many perks to recertifying in the future, knowing that you'll be able to receive a handful of efficiencies. And as shown here on this screen, the project has already received 16 out of 88 strategies that are pre-approved and already completed. So before working on any of the strategies, the project is also already at 29 points that you can see underneath the Fitwel score. And then within the scorecard sections themselves, you'll be able to see a pre-approved portfolio-wide strategy efficiency banner. So those will be applied to the associated strategies that were approved during PWS submission. And for this efficiency, it pre-selects, pre-fills, and carries over any approved documentation for any project using multi-tenant base building STAR certification within this portfolio.
This is really exciting to see a newly registered project already achieving 16 strategies. These are strategies that you don't have to do anything for, as Denelin pointed out, and you can see here under documentation, you can even see that this was approved during the PWS process. So it's nice to even see the requirements complete noted as well. So this is where I do want to point out, as I mentioned earlier, that this is where you can opt out of any strategies that do not apply to a specific asset. So there's some language here that tells you how to do so. So you can change the option if it's a different option that you wish to pursue, or change your response from yes to no. And as an example, since we're on the tobacco and smoke-free environment strategy, let's say, for example's sake, that option 2 here was awarded for PWS, as typically across a portfolio, maybe you only have a smoke-free policy in place. So if this asset specifically has a tobacco and smoke-free policy and wishes to pursue full credit with option 1, they can respond to that strategy by changing it from the pre-selected option 2 to option 1 and uploading full documentation for review during initial review. So as we wrap up this portfolio-wide strategies portion, and I will stop sharing the platform now, Denelin, can you share more about what's coming with PWS and what you and the digital product team are working on?
Yeah, so as part of the enhancements based on those earlier user feedback sessions, the formal review process of PWS is currently underway. So right now, when a portfolio team submits their PWS, if there are any strategies that cannot be approved, the certification team typically sends out an email with strategy feedback comments to allow the PWS team to submit revised documentation via email. So we're actually working to integrate the sort of client response stage through the platform. And we expect this to be available and functioning around mid-April or so. And it will also include on the PWS overview page a PWS timeline, which is very similar sort of to the scorecards certification timeline, just letting users know the next milestones. We've heard from many of our users how valuable this tool has been at the project level. And I just want to say, as always, to those joining or watching later, please continue to provide your feedback to Fitwel, whether good or bad, just so we know what's working for you and what's not working as you go throughout your certification journey. As a product manager, I'm always eager to optimize your Fitwel experience through our platform.
Of course, and I definitely want to echo what Denelyn's saying. Feel free to share feedback. We have multiple channels to do so. You can reach out to us via info at ambassadors@fitwel.org. If you're an ambassador, we have a lot of forms on our help center and website. And Denelyn and her team work very hard to make sure that we keep up with client feedback and respond accordingly. So thanks for sharing and thanks for joining today. So stay tuned for those enhancements that Denelyn mentioned. And I did also just want to share on screen and point out that if anybody hasn't seen this on the scorecard, we have recently in this past year added certification timeline. So you can now see that we started the process on February 6th for this project. The date would then populate for when the scorecard was submitted, and then et cetera. So if you ever forget your project timeline, you can reference it there. Great. So now I want to hand it over to Rachel to talk about some new resources that support portfolio scale implementation.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. So as excuse me, as part of the continued evolution of Fitwel V3, we've been working on ways to make documentation more consistent and easier to implement at scale. And so one of the ways we're doing this is through fillable templates for some policies and protocols. And so some examples of that would include the cleaning protocol, the chemical purchasing protocol, and we may expand this over time, but those are the current fillable forms that we have at the moment. But these forms really will allow teams to input your portfolio or specific asset-specific information directly into the template, which will generate a structured PDF that you can use for submission. So the aim of this is to help clarify exactly what information is needed. So you'll find directives and prompts asking you to provide specific information related to your portfolio or assets practices. It should help to reduce formatting inconsistencies and to streamline the certification review process because it's already kind of giving the prompts of what they require of you so you can clearly see if something is missing. So we will quickly show you the cleaning protocol as an example to review the enhancements that we've made to support your documentation efforts. As you can see here, it's a form you can fill out to document your approach, identifying whether the protocol is applied portfolio-wide or is this asset-specific. You can note the applicable areas, the asset types that this protocol applies to. You can include relevant narratives, so there will be prompts, as you can see below, some areas for you to fill in narrative fields, things like that, check boxes, like there's a narrative response form. So we've updated these resources on the Help Center, and we'll dive into these templates more in depth at a later date. And if you also missed last month's webinar where we covered some of the V3 enhancements in detail, you can find that recording and all the related resources in the Help Center. But yes, we're really excited about these forms, and we really hope that they help to streamline your documentation process and support the PWS implementation.
I know I'm excited about this, having managed accounts in the past and also joining a lot of feedback sessions with the relationship managers. Cleaning protocol specifically is one that gets called out as this being something that would be really helpful. So directly responding to client feedback, this is just going to save a lot of people a lot of time in submitting those, especially across an entire portfolio and sharing these with different property management teams. So thanks again to the standard team and Rachel. So before we move into Q&A, I want to say thanks again, Denalyn and Rachel, for joining today. It was really great to have your perspectives on the call. And before we move into that Q&A and answer any of your questions that we haven't taken a look at in the chat or the Q&A box, I wanted to just review a few Fitwel updates. As many of you have seen on our social media, we've put some sneak peeks out. We're excited to officially launch the 2026 Best in Building Health Awards tomorrow. So stay tuned, follow along on social media, sign up for our newsletter, or visit our website to learn more and celebrate with us this year. We currently also have a couple discount codes, as I mentioned earlier, available through the end of this month. So March 10, we'll share these in the chat as well, so you can copy and paste them. But March 10 for 10% off certification fees invoiced and paid by the end of this month. And then 2026 Recert 10 is for 10% off your recertification fees invoiced and paid by the end of the month. And this one is stackable on top of your auto-applied 20% recertification discount. So definitely take advantage of that. We also opened it up to projects that are past their 2-year or 1-year grace period. So if you have a project that kind of has resurfaced recently and would like to get 30% off your recertification, definitely take advantage of that code through next week. So in case you missed outreach from our team, also just kind of talking about project codes and discounts. If you have a V2.1 project with certification fees that have not yet been invoiced and paid, those projects will upgrade to V3 at the end of the month if payment is not received. So reach out to us if you need help confirming payment status or accessing an invoice. We're happy to help. And we can send you how to reach out to us in the chat. As I mentioned earlier, info@fitwel.org, ambassadors@fitwel.org, or your relationship manager if you are a champion account. We're also excited to share that Fitwel will be participating in Smart City Expo in Brazil this week. Our head of partnerships, Nadine Rashid, will be representing Fitwel and engaging with leaders across real estate, urban planning, and public health to advance health-focused design globally. We'll share the schedule of the sessions that are available at Smart City, the Smart City Expo in the chat for anybody that's attending. Her session will be at 2 p.m. tomorrow, local time, if anybody is there. Okay, those are all of our updates. I wanted to address a few questions that we've received about PWS just real quickly since we have some time before the end of the session. So real quick, and I'll answer a couple of these and then hand some off to Denalyn and Rachel. So for PWS, how much does it cost? So because PWS is still in its pilot phase, as we mentioned previously, there are still some enhancements that we're coming out with. And as Denalyn mentioned, it is an offline client response phase. So it is currently free to implement and use across portfolios. So feel free to reach out to our team to get started on those. And then can I add an additional strategy to my PWS submission during client response? This is a great question, and yes, you can. Similar to FSP and STAR certifications, project teams are always welcome to pursue new strategies for submission during that client response phase. If there's, documentation you've received between submission and that client response phase, we encourage you to submit that at that point. However, I do want to point out that submitting any new strategies during that client response phase limits you to just a single review at the final review stage, so you won't get those initial review comments to respond to and make any revisions. So just make sure it's some solid documentation. And then another question that we've received is, does it matter how I organize my portfolios on the platform for PWS application? Denalyn, do you mind answering this one?
Yeah, so we highly recommend that any portfolio using PWS, make sure that any projects associated with those strategies, those shared policies, protocols, and operational standards are located in the same portfolio as that PWS scorecard, just to make sure that those approvals are carried over as an efficiency to those projects within in the portfolio. So short answer, yes, just make sure they're organized that way.
Yes, definitely. And then is PWS available for V2.1 projects? Rachel, if you want to take this one.
Um, no, PWS is only available on the platform for V3 projects. So while you may have some V2.1 projects within the portfolio using PWS, the efficiencies will only apply to V3 projects.
And that's a great point. Yeah, so any in progress V2.1 projects you have and you pursue PWS, if you want to then upgrade those in progress certifications to V3 to really utilize any of those efficiencies, definitely take advantage of that. And we encourage you to use V3.
Yeah, and I think if you have V2.1 projects coming up on recertification, now's a good time to look into PWS for those multiple projects that might be going through just to streamline that process.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you'll get those last few efficiencies shown under the scorecard status box.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other questions? Feel free to send them in the chat. And if you have any follow-up questions, as I mentioned, always reach out after the sessions if anything comes up or you don't want to ask on the session live. We're happy to have a conversation or connect with you later. It doesn't look like we have anything coming through. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining today and for being part of the Fitwel community. We always appreciate your participation in these sessions. If you're interested in getting started with PWS, as I mentioned, please reach out to info@fitwel.org or your relationship manager since it does need to be initiated by a Fitwel admin at the moment. And then we'll also be sharing today's recording on the Help Center. Probably by end of day today or tomorrow, and it will be linked in the follow-up email that will go out as well. So thanks everyone. We'll give you a little bit of time back in your day, and we hope to see you at our next best practice session for our summer series. So thanks again to Rachel and Denelyn, and for all of you for joining.